was there Thursday night besides me? Was that dynamite?
Yes. Yeah, that was terrific.
Be like that all the time.
That is a demonstration, a manifestation of answered prayer. Not only mine, but many other people. I just want to take credit for it because it was my prayer. I know that. But it was. 4 years ago last Sunday, I took over as the senior minister of the Spiritual Awareness Center out in Madera. And probably a year ago this week or maybe next week, I sat down with Reverend Joanna, who was my predecessor, and she is still with me. And I talked to her about my vision for the Central Valley. And last Thursday night, I got to see what that vision looked like. And it was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was wonderful. Prayer, powerful, powerful, powerful tool. A little story on prayer, and actually I heard this from a Unity minister. He was relating a prayer that had come to him via somebody else. And it goes something like this.
Wow.
Powerful, powerful. Please pray for Ed. He's in a lot of trouble. You see, Wednesday was Ed's wedding anniversary, and he forgot. And his wife is very, very angry. Ed's in a lot of trouble. And she has informed Ed that Friday morning when she gets up, she expects to see in her driveway a gift that will go from 0 to 200 in 10 seconds. Friday morning, Ed got up early. He was under the gun. He got out of the house, he was gone. A little while later, Ed's wife got up. She went to the window and she looked out. Sure enough, there was a package out there, but it wasn't big. So she was a little confused, but she went out there and she picked it up, she brought it in the house, and she opened it up. It was a bathroom scale. Ed's been missing since Friday. Please pray for him. The power of prayer. The power of prayer. Committing to prayer. Commit to prayer has two different meanings. One of them is the commitment to praying, making it a part of our daily routine, if you will. And the other is when you pray, commit to what you're praying for. If you're praying for a new Ford, don't go hang out at the VW dealership. People do that, okay? Prayer, powerful, powerful thing. Charles Fillmore, Myrtle Fillmore, they really founded Unity on prayer. That was their whole thing. Now, anybody here not have an understanding of what affirmative prayer is? We all got that, right? We all know the various steps of affirmative prayer. So I don't have to go through them and explain them other than know that I'm talking to people that understand. When we look at prayer, that first in religious science, and I believe Unity is pretty much the same thing, there is a recognition of the divine. Divine. Okay? What is the divine? When we do our prayer, it is a realization of the divine manifesting in our life. That's why that first recognition is absolutely imperative. We got to recognize in our minds and our consciousness that we are that one, because when we are working on our prayer life, it is something we do in consciousness. But I want to shift gears for a minute. How many of you pray daily? Do you have a time, special time that you put together? No? Just whenever it works out? How many of you realize that you never cease praying?
Right.
When Jesus gave that commandment about praying ceaselessly, he wasn't telling you something that you need to do. He was telling you something that you do. You pray unceasingly. Thoughts are things. Anybody have any questions on that? Thoughts are things. What are your thoughts? What's your thought life? Forget your prayer life for a minute. What's your thought life lately? Am I praying for that Volkswagen showing up at the Ford dealership? Did I reverse that? It doesn't make any difference. Did I, am I praying for relationship? And I'm being a porcupine? Am I praying for love, but I fail to give my love? Am I praying for abundance, but I fail to, which reminds me, unity is the kind of like the founding philosophy on prosperity consciousness. Story about Charles Fillmore, and this doesn't have a lot to do with prayer, but I love the story. He had at Unity one Sunday, he had a very well-known person come in and speak, a minister that had a large congregation, and everybody was looking, kind of like today, everybody's looking for it. But this minister got up, and he'd only been talking for about, 5 minutes. And he made a point, very proud. He says, we don't take an offering in our church. We just put a basket back there, whatever anybody feels like putting into it. And about that time, Charles Fillmore got to the man, pulled his books, and said, please leave the podium. We don't teach that. We teach prosperity. And in order for someone to be prosperous, they have to understand the philosophy, the power of the tithe, which really kind of ties back into prayer. When you think about your day, as you're going through your day, you know how you can tell? There's commit to prayer, in other words, the time that you put into prayer, but there's committing to follow, which is the follow-through on what you're praying about. You can tell the first one just by keeping track. I made my appointment time with prayer today, and this, that, and the other. I watch my thoughts during the day. But the other one, you can also gauge how you're committing to your prayer life, because if you're not tithing your time, your talent, and your treasure, you're not living a prayerful life, because you don't have faith in what you're praying about. You are speaking the words that I speak the words, but I'm not following through. If I believe that God is all abundance, if I believe that there's nowhere that God is not, if I believe that God answers prayer, what in the heck keeps me from putting my 10% or 20% or whatever percentage I think I need into that bowl, or giving my time and service to the church or to the community, going out and helping homeless people, or learning to play the guitar so I can show up on Sunday and make a joyful noise. Each and every one of us have our own talents and our own time and our own treasure. And if we're not tithing that back to the spiritual source of our good, then we can't really say we believe. We're holding back. We're keeping our good back because we live in fear. We have a consciousness of limitation. If I tithe my time, I'm not going to have time enough to take care of my chores at home. If I share this here, I'm not going to have enough to share over there. If I reach into my pocket and I give on a spiritual basis, when the bills come at the end of the month, I'm not going to have the money to pay for it. Do I believe that God is going to provide for me, or do I not? Am I going to commit to my prayer? I'm going to give my time, but am I going to give my commitment? And most of us, and I include myself in this, fall down. Because we're human. We fall down because we forget. We forget that there's a unity, that there's a oneness, that God is ever present. And we get caught up in our separateness, our personal separateness, our societal separateness, on a national level, on our national separateness. When I spoke the other night, I'll share something with you. I spoke the other night. I had prepared to talk about prayer at the Thursday night thing because it's a World Day of Prayer. Somehow I failed to look at Reverend Valerie's note that she sent me that said I'm going to be talking on peace. So I'm sitting there in the audience looking at the program for the evening when Reverend Mirtha was up there talking, and she's talking about a particular word, and I looked down. I said, I'm supposed to talk about peace. So my presentation Thursday night was created between that point and the time that I got onto the stage. Okay? How hard is it to talk about something that you pray about, something that you walk the talk in, and that you live in your life? You know, I could have come up here today totally unprepared. I'm not saying I did, but I could have, because I never stop preparing. I pray, I read, I study, and I do my darndest to live what I pray, read, and study about, and what I teach. But sometimes, that fear, you know what I'm talking about when I say that fear? Yeah, we get that fear. And you know, there's a little more month than there is paycheck, or you know, I've got to be in 3 different places at once, and this is very important to do this, and it's very important to do that. And we forget. We forget that we are that one, that we are whole, perfect, and complete. We forget when the doctor says this is the diagnosis. We forget, as Myrtle Fillmore said, I am a child of God and I am whole, perfect, and complete. There is a diagnosis and then there's a realization, and they're not necessarily the same. And I get from the diagnosis to the realization through my prayer work. And that's what prayer is all about. It's coming to that point of realization of the presence of God right here, right now, as me, expressing as me, doing for me, as I open myself up, having an understanding of a greater God, a greater good, and a greater life expression in the here and now, and there's nothing else but that. But trying to remember that, that's the rub. You know, in spiritual circles, we call it awakening to our good. And you know, it's kind of like each day. Every day I got to wake up to get to the day. You know, almost every day I got to wake up to get to my God too. Now, if I make it a point of starting my day when I wake up to the day by waking up to God at the same time, I do a little affirmation. And what is an affirmation? An affirmation is nothing more than prayer. We pray, we speak our affirmation. Our affirmations should be positive. They should be personal. They should be powerful. And they should be in the present tense. I'm living a great day today. I am a child of God. I am whole, perfect, and complete. I am abundance manifested as me, and I know that to be true. And I don't let the conditions... We talk about conditions. How many of us have conditions? You know, I usually look at them as problems. I don't get to that condition. You know, it's easy to stand up here and talk about conditions. You know, I got this condition, I got that condition. But when I look at them, all I see is problems. Oh, I got this problem. Getting them back to conditions. That's part of what my prayer work is about. Committing. See, if we don't commit in time-wise, in the doingness of it, and we don't commit in the action step of following through with it, we're like that rudderless boat out there in the ocean. We bob around. You know, we see the sun come up and we see the sun set, and maybe today it comes up over here and tomorrow it comes up over there, and it sets wherever, because we're doing all this. Our prayer, our conscious prayer is what I'm talking about. Our conscious prayer time is what focuses us in on the realization of the truth, the divine presence as us. How wonderful is that? How energetically empowering is that? How completing is that? There is but one presence, one power, one omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent divine being. And you know what? My God is not your God. Now there's one God, but the God that I understand, as I understand it, is not necessarily the God that you understand, as you understand it. So we've got to grow a little bit. We've got to stretch. You know, that consciousness has been ingrained in humankind going back to when we had thunder gods and lightning gods and goat gods and cow gods. And then we have Christian gods, and Jewish gods, and Muslim gods, and you know, Hindus have 360 million gods. Wow. But they also got one God, Brahman, the big super God above everything. understanding that we relate to God based on our own individuality. And so our journey, if you will, our prayer work, if you will, is opening up to an understanding, and we speak about a greater good and a greater God. A God greater than my understanding of God. Because each and every one of us, if we had the dictionary in our brain and used every descriptive word in the dictionary to describe the divine, it's going to fall far short of the reality of the truth of what is. That's why we've got different religions and different sects within religion, because people try to define what they do. They're like the blind man and the elephant. You know, well, God's this long thing, or God's this trunk thing, or God's this big round thing, or God's this flappy thing, and we're all talking about God, and we're all talking about the same God, but we're different in our talking about it, because we relate individually. So, one of the things that I pray for when I do my prayer work is to have a greater understanding and a greater acceptance of the good that God is. And that when someone comes to me and says, you know, God this, God that, and it's in a way that maybe, you know, it's a different religion or something, you know, I don't go, well, you know, that's not the way I got a science of mind God. And my science of mind God, you know, we've got this good thing working, and your whatever God just doesn't measure up to my science of mind God. No. My God and your God is the same God. We just see it from a different perspective. And some of you have heard me tell this story before. Seeing from a different perspective was brought home to me very powerfully. About 8 years ago, I detached the retina in my right eye. And I at first didn't realize what was going on, and then I got to the doctor. Fortunately, I got there in time, because there's a limited window where they can do repair. But they can do repair. I said, this is great. Sign me up. And they did. They took me in, they did the surgery. And I spent, I don't know, a week or so with a patch on my eye and all this other good, happy stuff. And then they pulled the patch off. And what I see in this eye is different than what I see in this eye. If I do this, you all go like this and like this. If I go like this, you all go like this and like this. It's a different reality. But it's truth as I see it. But I see two different truths. What is real? Neither one. They're just my perspective. What you will see will be a little bit different. We live a victim of our senses, and it's in that moment of meditation and prayer and silence that we set all that stuff aside. I'm not Reverend Dr. Steve, or Steve, or Little Stevie, or whatever other names, and don't repeat that. Little, you know, whatever. I'm just that consciousness that is opening itself up to God. I found out there's more to life, and it is the truth that sets us free. You know, and that's how those words came to me in that song. That we can go within, and we can let God's love come and play. Because isn't that what God does? Isn't that love, whether it's a love of nurturing, whether it's a love of healing, isn't it playing within our soul? Isn't it playing within our heart? Isn't it playing within our mind? And we allow it to come through us, to manifest into a greater life. So the other night when I found out I had to talk about peace, you know how hard it was? All I had to remember was a story I'd heard about Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Henry David Thoreau. And that set up the whole thing. Thoreau wrote the book, Gandhi read the book, King read Gandhi. It started here, it went there, it came back here. 200 and some years thereabouts, and here it is. There is an ideal and an idea that exists within the mind of God. That ideal and idea is peace and love and harmony. And it's in our personal commitment, in the doing, the daily doing, consciously, and watching ourselves when we're unconsciously, because we never stop praying. So, you know the story, the guy cuts you off or, whatever, and I taught a handbook to higher consciousness, and the fourth pathway is, I always remember I have everything I need to be happy in the here and now. I always remember life is always good. It may not be pleasant, but if I don't prep myself, if I don't lay the foundations, if I don't build the consciousness within myself, then I'm back in my stuff. And who likes to be in their stuff? It's always a losing proposition. Yeah, you got it, Ed. That's it. So, prayer. Prayer. Know what you do. Be aware of what you do when you're not doing it consciously. And when you're doing it consciously, be aware of what you're doing. Because if you're praying for peace and you're getting mad at your neighbor, you're not being the peace you want to see in the world. I'm sorry. And it starts with us. And it really ends with us. We create the consciousness. That grouping that came together the other night was so powerfully in the energy. We create the consciousness, we create the light, and it goes out. That light is here today, this morning, with each and every one of you. Take a look around at this. This is love manifest as you. This is energy manifest as you. And that love and that energy is God. And it's you, and it's here, and it's now. And so it is.